Chapter 3 Military The Basics. Introduction and the days when the boy stepped into the fire that would shape the man. There are thresholds in life you don't realize you are crossing until years later, moments that look ordinary from the outside but echo through your soul long after you've walked past them. For me, that threshold was the gate of the South African Air Force Base in the winter of 1975. I was 16, too young to be a man, too old to stay a boy, and carrying a suitcase filled with more fear than belongings. The days leading up to that moment still live inside me with an almost sacred clarity. My mother folding clothes for a world she feared would swallow me. My father studying the instruction list as if preparation could protect his son. The hotel room in Sunnyside where I lay awake listening to the noises of a city I didn't yet know how to navigate. All of it was the soft edge of a hard new beginning. But walking through those booms, that was the true crossing. A boy walked in. A young man would be carved out of what remained. What waited on the other side was not bravery or honor or the pride of wearing a uniform. What waited was stripping of name, identity, softness, and childhood. It began the day my name was taken, when a corporal stood nose to nose with me and said the boy I'd been up to that moment would never exist again. In the military, they do not teach discipline first. They dismantle you first, piece by piece, so they can rebuild the parts that matter. And yet, inside those months of shouting, dust, cold water, bloody shins, fear, humiliation, and exhaustion, something else began to take shape. Brotherhood, awareness, courage, the first true rhythm of manhood. It grew in the moments we broke, hiding in lockers, crying quietly, drowning under bricks in a swimming pool. And in the moments we rose again because someone beside us whispered, "Come, bow it, keep going." It grew in the nights when the barracks found its rhythm, dog tags tapping, fists drumming, hearts beating in one defiant cadence, until even the instructors recognized that what we had become inside that room was stronger than anything they could shout at us. It grew the night ambition found a voice, not a loud one, but one brave enough to step forward and ask, "Sergeant, how do we win?" And in the quiet nod that followed, a boy discovered that leadership begins long before a man knows he is capable of carrying its weight. It grew in the reckless freedom of young men borrowing trouble, in the dangerous laughter of adventure, in the mistakes that only youth can excuse, and in the realization that character is forged not by never crossing the line, but by learning why certain lines must never be crossed again. And finally, it grew on the day the squadron stood as one, when victory was no longer about a trophy, but about carrying each other so completely that 24 bruised, exhausted, nearly broken boys could fit under one metaphorical blanket. Because unity, like courage, is not a feeling, it is a choice. This chapter is not about the military. It is about the boy who walked into a world that demanded everything of him, and discovered piece by piece the man he was born to become.
When the boy stepped into a man's world. A story about stepping over the threshold between boyhood and manhood. There is a moment in every young man's life when the world stops feeling like something that happens around you and starts feeling like something you must walk into. For me, that moment came in the winter of 1975, on the day I left home to join the South African Air Force. The eve before everything changed. In the days leading up to my departure, our house felt different. There was a strange mixture of pride, tension, and excitement that hung in the air like dust in a sunbeam. My mother moved through the rooms with a quiet determination, folding and refolding clothes that I wasn't even allowed to take. My father studied the instruction list again and again, the one the Air Force had sent, although there wasn't much to study. Unlike hostel life, where clothes and rules filled every corner of your days, the military required almost nothing from home. Toiletries, a pair of underwear, a heart ready for whatever waited on the other side. I was 16, still half boy, half man, with a future too big for the skin I was living in. But something inside me whispered that I was ready. The day before my report date, we drove to Pretoria. My father didn't want to risk a flat tire or a late start. He was meticulous like that, a man who believed preparation could protect you from anything. We checked into a small hotel in Sunnyside, the first hotel I had ever stayed in. The room smelled of carpet cleaner and old wood, and the street noises drifted in through the window like a soundtrack to a life I had not yet lived. I lay awake most of that night. Cars rushed past, doors slammed. Somewhere a couple argued. And inside me there was that strange, indescribable mixture of excitement and fear, the kind that makes your heart feel too big for your chest. I was a child standing on the edge of a cliff, telling myself I knew how to fly. The road to Littleton. Before sunrise, we packed the car and drove toward Waterkloof and Littleton. My mother had packed coffee and sandwiches, although none of us could really eat. As we turned toward the base road, I saw the gate long before we reached it. The Air Force badge displayed proudly above the entrance like a silent challenge. My heartbeat changed. It was no longer excitement. It was the drumbeat of destiny, the first one I had ever heard. We stopped near the entrance. My mother straightened my shirt for the third time. My father cleared his throat twice before speaking. "You know the house number?" she asked again. "Ma," I said, smiling, "I know it." Of course I knew it. How could I forget the one number that tied me to the world I was now leaving? We said our goodbyes, short, tight, and trembling at the edges, and I walked toward the gate. I didn't look back immediately. When I finally did, I saw my mother wiping her eyes and my father standing stiff, his hands behind his back, a man trying to hold his own emotions in place. Then I turned and stepped through the booms. A boy walked in. A young man would eventually walk out. The queue of strangers inside the base, signboards marked the way. Registration Arrow, Medical Arrow Stores, Arrow Haircut. A long line snaked through the reception hall. There was none of the noise you found in school lines. No jokes, no showing off, no pushing, just quiet. Men of all shapes and ages, some 18, some older, some with long hair and beards, others clean-cut and nervous. I felt very young compared to them, 16 and pretending to feel older than I was. When my turn came, a friendly corporal greeted me, stamped a card, and pointed toward the stores. He said, "Welcome to the Air Force, son." It was the first time a stranger had called me son. It felt both comforting and terrifying. The kit, the trunk, and the fear at the stores, uniforms were thrown across the counter with military precision. Shorts, shirts, boots, parade shoes, PT clothes, overalls. We were given a blue metal trunk and a canvas ball sack, the same bag every soldier carried. Pinned to my trunk was a card that said Barracks 7. I found it easily. A long, echoing room with 5 beds inside. I chose the one by the window, hoping the light would anchor me during the nights I knew would feel too long. I unpacked everything neatly, not out of discipline, but because order felt like safety. Then came the medical tests. I didn't understand much of it, but I heard the doctor say, G1K1. Months later, I learned it meant, you are fit enough that the instructors can break you, and you will still survive. Comforting. The first men who would shape my military life. When I returned to the barracks, the other boys had begun to arrive. Justin, a sharp-witted English boy from Yeppe. Freak, a big, broad boy from Alberton, with a very rich father. Ruhe, quiet, uncertain, and carrying a sadness that hung behind his eyes. He said he had grown up in several children's homes. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I could feel the weight of it. Then there was Dawi, older than the rest of us, already a qualified teacher from Rustenburg. We introduced ourselves the awkward way boys do, curious, cautious, pretending to be braver than we felt. Inside, each of us wondered the same thing. What have I joined? Will I make it? Who will I become? At 1700, we had to report to the parade ground, still in civilian clothes, still unshaped clay in the eyes of the instructors. And then came slang, Van Zyl. The first man to address us was a small-built, red-mustached sergeant major with a voice that sounded like sandpaper and authority rolled together. "Ek is Sergeant Major Slang Van Zyl," he declared. Many years later, I would still remember that moment. The way his presence filled the air, the way the fear crawled into my stomach before I had even taken my first order. I had no idea then just how much I would come to hate him, or how much I would learn from him in the months to come. He explained the system. Tomorrow morning, every man would fall in behind his assigned number. These were our escators, our platoons. I was placed in Squadron 2. Then he dismissed us with a final warning. "Sleep well. Tomorrow your childhood ends." The night before the storm. That night, lying on the thin military mattress, I listened to the unfamiliar rhythm of the barracks. Men breathing, boots dropping, someone sobbing quietly 2 beds down. My mind drifted back to school, to the hostel, to the boy I had been only a week ago. The boy who still rode a bicycle and dreamed of freedom. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't a hostel. This wasn't a game. This was where boys were stripped down and rebuilt, where weak habits died, where new identities were born. For the first time in a long time, fear and excitement lived side by side in my chest, wrestling like brothers. I closed my eyes and let the unknown swallow me. Because in that moment, in that cold barracks in Pretoria, I understood something without having the words for it. To become the man I was meant to be. I first had to let the boy inside me go.
Reflection. Becoming a man isn't an age, it's a moment. There are turning points in life, quiet ones, without applause or warning, where a boy suddenly feels the weight of something larger than himself settling onto his shoulders. For me, that moment came the day I walked through the gates of the Air Force Base. I didn't understand it then, but I was crossing more than a parade ground. I was crossing the invisible line between childhood and responsibility. Up to that point, life still had soft corners. Even the toughest moments, discipline at school, unfairness on the sports field, the sting of losing, the ache of moving towns, still happened in a world where adults stood close by, ready to catch you if you fell. But that morning, standing with a suitcase in my hand and my parents' last words echoing behind me, I realized no one was coming with me this time. The Air Force didn't care whether you were scared, homesick, or 16 years old. It didn't care about your background, your school performance, your father's expectations, or your mother's tears. It cared only about one thing. Who are you when everything familiar is taken away? That is where manhood begins, not in strength, not in age, not in bravado, but in the space where you meet yourself without the scaffolding of home. Looking back now, I can see how that moment awakened something inside me. Not pride, not confidence, not yet. What awakened was awareness. The knowing that your life is now shaped by your own choices, your own courage, your own discipline. The Air Force didn't only cut our hair and hand us uniforms. It stripped away the last illusions of boyhood so that we could see ourselves clearly for the first time. And in that clarity, something powerful is born, a sense that you can endure, a belief that you can adapt, a whisper that resilience begins here. That boy who walked through the gates on the 1st of July 1975
had no idea that the next weeks would break him down, build him up, and eventually prepare him for the man he was meant to become. But that's the strange gift of moments like these. You don't know what they're shaping until life asks you to use it.
The Day My Name Was Taken. A story about identity, power, and the moment a boy begins to disappear so a soldier can be formed. There is a certain coldness that hangs over a military parade ground in the early morning, a mixture of dew, diesel fumes, and nerves. It settles on your skin, crawls under your shirt, and makes your heart beat a little faster than it should. On that first morning at the Air Force training base at Pretoria, we stood in 3 uneven lines, a nervous collection of boys trying to look like men. We were roughly 100 recruits, divided into 3 squadrons of about 30 each. Some were broad-shouldered farmers' sons, some were musicians, mechanics, dreamers, and dropouts. Most were 18 or older, shoulders already shaped by manhood. And then there were a few of us, boys, 16 years old, still more school than soldier, still more child than man. We didn't yet know how out of place we looked. We didn't yet know what the next 3 minutes would take from us. The arrival of the 4 men. As we stood there, shifting anxiously in our civilian clothes, 4 men approached from across the field. They didn't walk, they marched. Even their footsteps carried authority. Nothing about them suggested friendliness. Their faces were carved from stone, their gazes hard enough to scrape the confidence off your bones. When 2 of them approached our squadron, the air around us seemed to tighten. The first introduced himself, Corporal Mons van Heerden. He said it with a sharpness that made you straighten without thinking. He told us he had just completed his course as a physical training instructor, a PTI. In the Air Force, PTIs weren't ordinary instructors. They were the elite tormentors, the ones known for turning boys into machines. Even the older recruits swallowed hard when they heard that. But then he added something unexpected. I will be leaving soon. Sergeant de Villiers will take over as your instructor. If we thought that would soften the blow, we were wrong. Sergeant de Villiers stood to his right, broad, neat, merciless. The kind of man whose uniform looked ironed even while he was wearing it. Between them, the 2 created a shadow we all stepped into. Forming the lines, Corporal Mons ordered us into 3 rows. The moment he shouted, something inside every boy snapped into obedience. It wasn't fear exactly, more like instinct, a sense that the world we once knew had already ended. He explained that from that moment on, these were our positions: day or night, rain or heat. If the command came to fall in, we were to appear in these exact spots. Then he said something I would only understand much later. Not all of you will be here at the end. The Air Force keeps only the best. Sergeant de Villiers will make sure of that. I felt the boys around me stiffen. Some tried to look tough. Some looked down. Some looked like they wanted to run. I just felt 16. The name every soldier must shout. The next command was simple. When your turn came, shout your full name and your newly assigned service number. One by one, the boys stepped forward, voices cracking with nerves. Peter Jacobs, number 758. Garrett Botha, number 759. I stood in the front row. My turn came quickly. I filled my lungs, stepped forward the way a soldier should, and shouted, Chris Van Heerden, service number 7588633. For a moment, nothing happened. Just a strange, heavy silence. Then Corporal Mons stepped forward. Not walked, stepped. His boots hit the ground with precision and purpose. He closed the distance slowly, deliberately, until his face was almost touching mine. I could feel the heat of his breath. I could see the veins in his neck. I could smell the metal polish on his uniform. His voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. It was cold, measured, sharper than any shout. "You filth," he said, "will never again be Chris Van Heerden. You will carry my name. You are from this moment Mons Van Heerden." For a moment I thought I heard him wrong, but he continued. "I told the sergeant to work you harder than the rest. If you carry my name, you will earn it with blood." The squadron stood frozen. No one breathed. No one blinked. My heart was hammering so violently I could hear it in my ears. He stepped back slowly, satisfaction curling at the corner of his mouth. I didn't understand what had happened. Not fully. I didn't understand the meaning behind a stolen name. But I felt it. A strange emptiness. A coldness where something warm had lived before. A name is more than a word. It's the story you've lived, the boy you've been, the home you come from, the people who call you. And in 3 sentences, mine was taken away. A new name, a new burden. From that moment on, no one called me Chris again. Not for the entire time I served. To the instructors, to the squadron, to my fellow recruits, I became Mons. A name that wasn't mine. A name that didn't fit my body or my history. A name I had to grow into, like a too big coat. I didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. I was 16, barely finished with school sports and report cards. And suddenly, I was expected to follow in the footsteps of a trained PTI. The bar wasn't just high. It was sitting somewhere in the clouds.
Reflection. The day my name was taken and the boy I was began to fall away. There are moments in a young man's life when something inside him is rewritten, silently, brutally, without permission. This was mine. That parade ground moment taught me one of the earliest truths of the military. Before they teach you discipline, before they teach you skill, they take your identity apart, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you into someone who can withstand what lies ahead. When Corporal Mons changed my name, he didn't humiliate me. He reshaped me. He forced me to confront the uncomfortable truth that manhood isn't inherited. It is carved, sometimes with encouragement, sometimes with cruelty. Looking back, I understand something I didn't at 16. When life strips something from you, it is preparing to give something back. Not the same thing, but a version forged in fire. My name changed that day, but so did my understanding of strength, responsibility, and identity.
The First Pass Home. A story about longing, disappointment, and the quiet pride of returning as someone new. There are weeks in military training that feel like months, long stretches of days molded together by sweat, commands, drill, punishment, and the constant weight of uncertainty. But nothing stretches time quite like waiting for your first weekend pass. By week 6, every man in our squadron had begun dreaming in the same direction. Home. 6 weeks might not sound long to someone on the outside, but in the military, it feels like a lifetime. Every day carries the weight of 10. Every morning steals something from you. Every night gives back only exhaustion. And somewhere inside that grind, the idea of home becomes more than a place. It becomes a lifeline. For me, home meant one thing: my parents, the familiar smell of my mother's cooking, the safety of walls that didn't shout orders. We needed that pass more than we needed rest. The pass. We never got it. Was a Friday morning, the end of our 6th week of training, when the entire base gathered on the parade ground. The tension was electric, the kind that hums in your bones. Even the instructors felt different, not softer, simply quieter. We knew the routine. Passes were handed out at the end of parade. A signature on a piece of paper. That was all that stood between us and freedom. I stood there with my heart thudding against my ribs, imagining my mother's face when she opened the front door, imagining my father pretending not to be emotional, imagining a plate of real food in front of me. But then the air changed. A voice climbed above the silence, sharp, nasal, unmistakable. Sergeant Major Slang. He stepped onto the podium with a look on his face that told us nothing good was approaching. His red mustache twitched. His eyes scanned us the way a butcher scans meat. "Troipe," he began, his voice cutting through the cold morning. "Some of you walked across the grass in front of headquarters." Every man froze. "You know the rules. No one walks on the grass." A long pause. A man who cannot respect small rules cannot respect big ones. My stomach sank. No one gets a pass this weekend. It felt like someone dropped a stone inside my chest. A wave of disbelief moved through the squadron, not spoken, just felt. A collective exhale of crushed hope. Then he added almost casually, "This weekend, you will pick up every cigarette stompy on the base and pull weeds." He smiled. Maybe next weekend. He stepped back. And just like that, the parade was dismissed. No shouts, no arguments, just quiet devastation. Some boys had girlfriends waiting, some had plans. Some had spent nights imagining a warm bed, a soft couch, a plate of food that didn't come from a metal tray. And me? I had been holding back homesickness with discipline and pride. Now it broke through like a cracked dam. The week that wouldn't end. That weekend, instead of going home, we bent over patches of sand and grass, picking up stompies, pulling weeds, baking in the sun while the instructors watched from the shade. No one complained. You learn quickly in the military that suffering is safer than speaking. By Sunday night, every man looked older, not from age, but from disappointment. But something strange happened, too. The injustice united us. We stopped waiting for fairness. We stopped hoping for mercy. We simply endured. And sometimes, endurance is a deeper teacher than relief. The pass that finally came. The following Friday, we stood again on the parade ground. Same formation, same tension, same cold morning air. But this time, something felt different in the air. A softness, a release. When our instructor announced, "Trepe, jola cri jola nawek pas," the entire parade ground seemed to exhale. We were going home. 7 long weeks after I'd last seen Sasselberg, I was going home. The Bedford truck rattled through Pretoria and dropped us at the train station. Soldiers never paid for tickets. We simply climbed aboard and sat where there was space. The train rattled south, Pretoria to Germiston, Germiston to Vereeniging. And the closer I got, the more something warm began rising inside me. Not just excitement, pride. I wasn't the same boy who had left 7 weeks earlier. Something had shifted in me. Strength, awareness, a dusting of manhood I hadn't earned yet, but was beginning to understand. The lift that carried me home. I hadn't called my parents. I wanted to surprise them. I wanted to see their faces without warning. From Vereeniging Station, I did what every soldier did back then. I held out my thumb on the side of the road, and within minutes, a man in an old, dust-stained bakkie pulled over. "Waarheen, troop?" he asked. "Sasselberg, meneer." "Climb in." I threw my blue kit bag into the back and climbed inside. As we drove, he asked questions. Where I trained, how long I'd been in, how I was finding it. I saw respect in his eyes. Not for me, for the uniform. When he dropped me near Franz Street, I climbed out feeling taller than when I'd left. the walk toward home. As I walked those last few streets, the winter sun warming my shoulders, something inside me swelled. I greeted the domestic workers walking home. They smiled at me, at the uniform, at the young man wearing it. And for the first time, I felt like I was becoming someone. Not a boy with school scars, not a hostile kid with fears, not a 16-year-old pretending to be older. A soldier, a contributor, a young man stepping into the world. My kit bag felt lighter than it was. My boots felt new. My heart beat a little faster. Just before I turned into our street, I paused. There it was, home, my mother's curtains, my father's car in the driveway, my childhood, still standing where I had left it. I walked the last few steps slowly, almost reverently. When I knocked, the door opened so quickly it was as if they'd been waiting. "Christy," my mother gasped. But I wasn't Christy anymore. Not completely. Not after everything I had faced. Not after everything I had endured. But for that moment, in that doorway, in those arms, I was just their boy again. The return. That night, sitting at the table with real food in front of me, I couldn't stop talking. The words poured out. Stories of drills, of fear, of laughter, of punishment, of the strange mixture of pride and pain that filled every hour of military life. My childhood friends, Cobus and Rhea, sat wide-eyed, hanging on to every detail. To them, I wasn't just Chris anymore. I was a soldier, a man becoming, a friend who had stepped into a world they couldn't imagine. Vanderbijl Park was behind me. The hostel was behind me. The boy I used to be was behind me. Ahead was something uncertain, but exciting, maybe frightening, but mine. And as I sat there, looking at my parents, my friends, and the familiar walls around me, one thing settled in my heart. Going home after the military isn't returning. It's arriving with new eyes.
Reflection. Freedom isn't the pass you hold, it's the person you return as. There is a moment in every young man's military journey when the gates finally open and he steps outside the base again, not as the boy who walked in, wide-eyed, uncertain, trying to swallow fear, but as someone who has been shaped by discipline, stripped by hardship, and rebuilt by endurance. That first weekend pass was exactly that moment for me. I didn't realize it at the time, but walking through Pretoria Station in my blue uniform, hitchhiking my way toward home, I was carrying something far more important than a signature on a piece of paper. I was carrying a new version of myself. 7 weeks earlier, I had stepped into the Air Force with a schoolboy's confidence and a schoolboy's fears. I thought strength was fitness. I thought bravery was doing something dangerous without showing emotion. I thought discipline was something adults enforced from the outside. But that first pass revealed the truth. Strength is who you are after you are pushed past what you thought your limit was. Bravery is choosing to continue even on the days you feel broken. Discipline is not rules, it is rhythm, forged inside you through repetition, pressure, and purpose. When I walked home that day, dust on my boots, my ball sock over my shoulder, I felt something I had never felt before. Pride without pretending, not because I was tough, not because I had survived the pool sessions, the polls, the screaming instructors, not because I stood taller or walked differently, but because I had endured. And endurance changes a young man more than success ever can. When my childhood friends looked at me with wide eyes, calling me a real soldier, they were seeing the uniform. But what I felt inside wasn't the uniform. It was the beginning of manhood. That first pass also taught me something life-changing. You don't truly appreciate home until you return after having to earn your way back. The warm food, the familiar walls, the laughter of people who know your history, the softness of being loved without performance, all of it felt different, deeper, more vivid, almost sacred, because the boy who used to take those things for granted had been stripped away, and the young man who returned understood their value. What this story teaches the soul. Every human being crosses this threshold at some point, not necessarily through military life, but through experience, pressure, responsibility, and hardship. There comes a moment when you return to a familiar place, but you are no longer familiar. That is the moment the soul stretches. That is the moment the mindset shifts from childhood into becoming. Ask yourself, who am I now after what I've endured? What beliefs have changed inside me? What have I outgrown quietly? What part of my identity was shaped by hardship, not comfort? How do I carry my growth back into the world I came from? The first pass didn't give me freedom. It revealed how much I had already changed. Freedom wasn't in the paper. It was in the person. A boy left Sasselberg 7 weeks before. A young man returned. And that, long before rank or skill or achievement, was the first real victory of my military journey.
The day they tried to break us a story about breaking points, brotherhood, and the moment a boy learns what endurance really is. There are days in a young man's life when the world tightens its grip around him, not to kill him, but to see what he is made of. Days that stand like doorways. One step before, you are still a boy. One step after, you can never go back. For me, that doorway arrived 5 weeks into basic training. By then, the shock of the Air Force had settled into something more dangerous. A rhythm. Not the warm rhythm of school routines or hostel mornings. This was a rhythm with teeth, sharp, punishing, relentless. A rhythm meant to strip you down until only the essential parts of you remained. And somehow, we had learned to live inside it. We woke to it, ran to it, feared it, obeyed it. Brothers without backgrounds. By week 8, something unexpected had happened inside our squadron. We had become a unit, not through trust or choice or shared dreams, through suffering. Suffering welds boys together in a way comfort never can. There were no rich kids, no orphans, no farm boys or city boys, no English or Afrikaans. There was only one question that mattered. Can you carry me when I fall? And will I carry you when you do? I had come into the Air Force fitter than most. Running felt like breathing to me. But fitness doesn't cancel fear. And at 16, surrounded by men with broader shoulders and harder eyes, fear lived in the cracks of every night. But even I began changing. You can pretend to be brave for a week. You can pretend to be brave for 2. But after 8, the pretending burns away, and whatever you are underneath begins to take shape. Nothing was ever good enough. By then we knew the truth. No matter what we did, it was wrong. Beds too wrinkled, boots too dull, lockers too messy, even when you could see your reflection in the steel. Marching too slow, too fast, too stiff. And the worst part was the unpredictability. Lights on at 3 a.m. or 5 a.m., or not at all. You slept light. You waited. You braced. And on Monday of the 8th week, they decided to give us a holiday. Whenever an instructor used the word holiday, pain always followed. The pool session from hell. All 3 squadrons gathered on the parade ground. The air was sharp, the sun low, the mood grim. Corporal Spies, Squadron 1's instructor, a man who seemed carved from cruelty, stepped forward with a smile that chilled the blood. Today, troop, we play. My stomach knotted. I felt it. We all felt it. We were ordered into full kit and sent to the swimming pool. 30 minutes later, we stood by the water, perfectly dressed as if for inspection. Into the pool! No touching the sides! Water tread until I say, stop! Fear rolled through the ranks. Some boys could barely swim. But it didn't matter. This wasn't about swimming. This was about breaking us. The cold water bit into our skin like knives. Boots filled with water and dragged us downward. Within minutes, weaker boys started slipping under, choking, panicking. A few were pulled out, shaking, humiliated, defeated. The rest of us stayed. Minutes stretched like wire, tight, cutting, unforgiving. When the order finally came to climb out, our bodies trembled, lungs burning. But the moment our boots hit the concrete, the next command arrived. Parade ground! Move! The poles. On the tar lay long wooden poles, heavy, unforgiving beams. 4 men per pole! We lifted. The wood dug into my shoulder like a blade. My uniform clung to my skin, still soaked from the pool. The chlorine stung my eyes. I could taste blood or sweat or both. We marched in circles, poles cutting into bone, legs shaking, breath sharp. When they finally dismissed us for lunch, relief didn't come. Something darker did, the knowledge that the day was far from over. The breaking point. The order came. 1400, back on the parade ground. When we returned to the barracks, something inside me gave way. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet collapse of strength. I sat on my bed, breathing hard, staring at nothing. Ruhei, my roommate from the children's home, the boy with the toughest childhood of us all, looked at me. "We're not going back," he whispered. And for the first time since arriving, I agreed. When the others marched out, we hid. Inside our lockers, behind our uniforms, hearts pounding, hands shaking. I cried in that locker, not loudly, just quietly, like a boy who finally reaches the end of himself. It is a terrible thing to feel your spirit collapse, even for a moment. But it is also the moment where a new spirit begins. They found us. It didn't take long. Boots stormed the passage, doors slammed open, shouts cracked through the air like gunfire. They found us. Not just me and Ruhi, almost 20 boys who had reached breaking point. We were dragged to the pool. The rest of the squadron sat on the pavilion, forced to watch. Humiliation is also a weapon. "Full kit! Backpacks with 2 bricks! Move!" The water swallowed us again. The bricks pulled us down. The uniforms dragged against our limbs. The shouting cut into our ears. Some boys screamed. Some went silent. Some stopped fighting altogether. When I dragged myself out of the water, vomiting from exhaustion, Corporal Spies stepped toward me. He planted his boot between my shoulder blades, pressing me into the cold concrete. He leaned down, voice poison and gravel. "I'm going to break you, son." Something inside me snapped. Not fear, not hatred, resolve. The moment the boy became a man. Pinned under that boot, soaked and shaking, I understood something for the first time in my life. If you don't obey, you get hurt. If you don't endure, you will break. If you don't find yourself, someone else will shape you. That day did not make me strong. It made me decide to be strong. A quiet shift, but a permanent one. In that moment, the boy in me buckled, and the young man stood up, trembling, exhausted, but unbroken. Not unhurt, never unhurt, but unbroken.
Reflection. Strength isn't built by comfort, it's carved by the moments that almost destroy you. Every young man faces a moment where the world stops being polite and shows its teeth. My moment came at the bottom of a swimming pool with 2 bricks on my back. I learned something essential that day. Resilience isn't born from confidence, it's born from collapse. From the moment you hide in a locker because you cannot take another step, and then something inside decides to rise anyway. That day taught me, brotherhood is born in suffering, not comfort. Courage doesn't roar, it whispers, "Get up." Identity isn't shaped by success, it's shaped by endurance. A breaking point isn't the end, it's where inner steel is forged. Our instructors believed they were breaking us, but what they were really doing was revealing us. They revealed who panicked, who persevered, who reached out, who shut down, who rose. And they revealed something in me that had been waiting quietly, the capacity to endure, to bend but not break, to stand even when standing hurts. I didn't walk away from that day stronger. I walked away transformed. Some days won't let you choose between winning and losing. They give you one choice only: rise or stay broken. And rising, even shakily, is enough.
The night the barracks found its rhythm. There are certain nights in military training that don't feel like they belong to the calendar. They belong to the soul. It was 2 nights after the breaking day, the day the pool swallowed us, the bricks drowned us, and Corporal Spies used our bodies as stepping stones for his own frustrations. The bruises were still fresh. The burn in my lungs hadn't gone away. Even my sleep came in pieces, cut short by the echo of his words. "I'm going to break you, boy." But the strange thing about pain is how quickly it becomes familiar. By the 4th week of training, we had stopped talking about it. Every muscle ached. Every morning felt like waking inside a body borrowed from an old man. But no one complained anymore. Complaining serves no purpose when there is no one to hear it. That night, our squadron returned from drill practice long after the sun had disappeared. The sky was a heavy navy blue curtain, and the stars looked like they were keeping their distance. We were soaked in sweat, uniforms sticking to our backs, boots full of dust. When we entered the barracks, something felt different. The room was quiet but not defeated. The silence felt alive, like a group of boys trying to breathe in the same rhythm. Ruhi stumbled to his bed first, dropping onto the mattress as if gravity had claimed him. Justin followed, throwing his boots under his bed with a grunt. Frick rubbed his shoulders, muttering in Afrikaans that he wasn't sure belonged in any Bible. I sat on my bed and rubbed my shins, still raw from the pole drills. My legs trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion so deep it touched the bones. That's when it began. A sound, soft at first, like someone tapping lightly on metal. I looked up. Dawi, our roommate from Rustenburg, older than the rest, sat at the end of his bed, tapping his dog tags together. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm, slow, intentional. Then Justin joined in, his boots hitting the floor in a soft stomp, stomp, stomp. And then Frick, drumming his fingers on the side of his locker. It wasn't planned. It wasn't an act of rebellion. It wasn't even music, not really. It was survival. Within minutes, the entire barracks was humming with a strange tribal rhythm, a heartbeat made from metal, wood, breath, fists, and exhaustion. I didn't know what to do at first. I watched the others. Their faces had changed. The pain was still there, but something else had joined it. Defiance. Then I lifted my dog tags, held them in my hand, and tapped them against my knee. Once, twice, 3 times. The rhythm grew louder, richer, deeper, 30 small sounds weaving into one. We weren't supposed to feel proud in those weeks. Everything was designed to strip pride, individuality, ego. The instructors made sure of it. Your name, your past, your dreams, all taken. Replaced by numbers, ranks, drills, and the constant threat of punishment. But that night, inside that dingy barracks with chipped paint and sweaty mattresses and broken boys, something different happened. We became a unit. Not because the Air Force said so, not because the instructors forced it, but because we were learning the truth. When the world tries to break you apart, the only way to survive is to come together. The rhythm continued for minutes, or maybe hours. Time meant nothing in that space. Some boys smiled for the first time that week. Others stared at the ground, letting the beat numb whatever fear they still carried. Then the footsteps came. Heavy, sharp, purposeful. Boots. Instructor boots. The rhythm stopped instantly. Sergent de Villiers appeared in the doorway, filling the frame like a storm cloud. His mustache twitched. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the room. He could smell rebellion the way a dog smells fear. He stepped inside, slow and deliberate. I felt the blood drain from my face. Was he going to punish us? Make us do push-ups until someone passed out? Send us back to the pool with bricks in our backpacks? Instead, he walked to the center of the room, paused, and said in a low voice, "Don't dit weer." Do it again. Not a shout, not a threat, not anger. A command, but a strange one. We were frozen. No one moved. Then Dowie tapped his dog tags. Once. De Villiers didn't flinch. "Louder," he said, so Justin stomped his boots too, and Frick drummed his locker. And I tapped my tags again. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm returned. De Villiers stood in the center of the room, listening. Really listening. His expression didn't soften, but something shifted, a crack in the armor, a flicker of recognition. He had once been where we were. He lifted a hand. The rhythm died instantly. He looked around the room, slowly, quietly, and then said, "Now you understand what a squadron is. Tomorrow, we start again. Properly." And he walked out. No punishment, no shouting, no threats. Just a lesson. Unity is the only thing that keeps a soldier alive. That night after lights out, no one spoke. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. A blanket instead of a cage. As I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the dark ceiling, I realized something had changed in me. 2 days earlier, I had cried in my locker like a boy who had reached his limit. Tonight, I felt something different. Not bravery, not strength, but understanding. Pain wasn't the enemy. Isolation was. And I was not alone. For the first time since stepping through the gates of the Air Force, I believed I might actually make it.
Reflection. Discipline is not what they teach you. It's what you discover inside yourself. There are moments in life when the world stops asking you who you are and begins demanding that you decide. That night in the barracks, when anger, exhaustion, fear, and unity collided, was one of those moments. Up until then, discipline had been something done to me, a voice shouting, a boot stomping, a command barked, a rule enforced. But somewhere between the banging of lockers, the thud of boots on concrete, and the whispered courage we gave one another in the dark, discipline shifted. It stopped being an external force and became something internal, a rhythm, a pulse, a decision. For the first time, I understood that survival in the military wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about learning to collect yourself when everything around you falls apart. It was about finding your breath when you feel you have none left. It was about standing when you want to collapse and helping others stand when they cannot. That night taught me that hardship doesn't just break people, it reveals them. I saw boys turn into leaders. I saw fear turn into focus. I saw myself change without noticing it was happening. The truth is, pain doesn't shape you. Your response to pain does. Fear doesn't define you. What you do while afraid does. And discipline isn't obedience. It's alignment. It's the moment your mind stops running from the discomfort and starts running with it. The barracks, with its cold floors and unforgiving routines, became something unexpected. A place where we learned to breathe together, move together, fail together, rise together. Years later, looking back, I realized it was never the shouted commands that shaped me. It was the moments in between, the silence after the lights went out, the shared sighs when the boots stopped thudding, the quiet nods of boys who knew they had survived another day. That is where character is forged, not in the noise, but in the spaces between it. And that night, When the barracks found its rhythm, I found something too, a strength I didn't know I had, a voice inside me that would grow louder through the years. Hold the line, keep moving, you are becoming.
The Night Ambition Found a Leader. A story about instinct, courage, and learning what true leadership looks like. By the 9th week of basic training, the barracks had settled into a rhythm of its own, an animal-like pulse that rose and fell with the voices of the instructors. You could hear it long before you saw it. The scrape of boots at 4:30, the slam of laundry bins, the coughing of exhausted boys who were too young to understand what endurance really meant. Even our breathing had fallen into the same cadence, a survival rhythm we didn't choose but slowly surrendered to. But beneath that rhythm, something else had begun to grow. Not fear. We had learned to live with fear. Not pain. Pain had become a daily companion. It was awareness. The same sharp, instinctive awareness I had discovered years earlier in the hostel at Vanderbilt Park, the night I studied the bully Michael the way a hunter studies his prey. It was the awareness that whispered, "Pay attention. Something is shifting." That night, as Sergeant de Villiers stepped out of the barracks after inspection, that instinct snapped open inside me like a trap. The door closed behind him. The footsteps faded. And suddenly the room felt different, like a space holding its breath. I watched him walk away, tall and immovable, his posture sharp enough to slice through the air. He wasn't like the others. Corporal Spies broke boys for sport. Corporal Duppies shouted because silence terrified him. But Sergeant de Villiers, he was something else entirely. Authority wrapped in discipline. Discipline wrapped in purpose. Purpose wrapped in a strange, hidden humanity. Earlier that day I had seen it, just for a moment, a softness flickering in his eyes. Most of the guys had missed it, blinded by fear and exhaustion. But I had felt it. Something in that softness spoke directly to my soul. And with that recognition came another realization, one that hit me like a spark to dry grass. There is always competition here. Every squadron wanted the same thing, the trophy. The instructors knew it, the officers knew it. But we, the new recruits, had been too busy surviving to think about it. Until that moment. As the barracks grew quiet and the night settled heavy around us, clarity washed over me in a way I cannot fully describe. We could win this. We, bruised, limping, gasping, could win. But not as we were. Not without direction. Not without leadership. And I knew exactly who the leader had to be. Not me. I was 16, the youngest. But him. The man whose approval we all felt before we understood it. The man who carried power without cruelty. The man whose presence made boys stand straighter. Sergeant de Villiers. I didn't sleep much that night. That the next morning, after drills, when the squadron was dismissed and the dust still hung in the air, something knotted itself inside my stomach. Every voice in my head said, "Don't do it. Stay small. Stay quiet. Keep your head down. You are 16. Don't draw attention." But another voice, deeper, older, the one that would shape my life for decades to come, whispered, "This is your moment. Step forward." As he turned to walk away, I felt my legs move before my courage caught up. "Sergeant, permission to talk?" He stopped, turned, looked straight at me. For a long moment, we just stood there. Me, a skinny 16-year-old boy pretending not to tremble. Him, a man built like a wall, trained to break boys into soldiers. And then it happened again. That shift in his eyes. The softness behind the steel. "Yes, Trope. Speak." My mouth was dry. But the words came. "Sergeant, Squadron 2 wants to win the competition. He didn't blink. We want to know what the categories are. What we must do. We want to win, Sergeant. He stared at me with an expression I could not read. Surprise, perhaps. Curiosity. Maybe even respect. Then he said my borrowed name for the first time. Mans. The sound of it hit me straight in the chest. You're the youngest in this squadron, he said quietly. Why are you the one asking me this? I swallowed. Because the others don't know yet, Sergeant. I wanted to speak to you first. He studied me. Not the way instructors studied for weakness, but the way leaders study potential. And then, slowly, he nodded. He stepped closer. Listen carefully, Mons. His voice dropped into the tone of a father preparing a son for the real world. It's not only about winning. The best squadrons win because they act like a unit. Because every man gives everything he has, not for himself, but for his team. Because they trust one another. I nodded. You want to win? He continued. Good. Then understand this. I will train you. I will push you. But you don't walk this road alone. Your ambition must become the squadron's ambition, all of you. Together. Then he turned and walked away. Not dismissing me. Releasing me. A challenge left hanging in the air, a pact neither of us had spoken out loud. He had seen something in me. Now I had to become it. The squad. Awakens. That night, I told Dowie, the oldest among us, steady, respected, almost father-like. He listened quietly, eyebrows raised. You asked him what? I nodded. He shook his head slowly, a smile hiding behind disbelief. Mans, you are flippin' crazy? I shrugged. What we're doing now isn't working. Let's make it interesting. He leaned back on his bunk, thinking. And you're sure this is what you want? No, I said honestly. But I think it's what we need. He nodded once, a decision settling in his eyes. Okay, let's do it. That night, after lights out, the barracks was filled with whispers. Dowie spoke to the squad, not like a soldier but like a man rallying his brothers. And something shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even fully visible. But the next day we moved differently. We helped each other stand when someone fell. We whispered encouragement during PT. We shared jokes in the mess hall. We began, quietly, slowly, stubbornly, to act like a team. Sergeant de Villiers saw it immediately. He didn't congratulate us. He didn't say a single word. He simply sharpened the drills, tightened the formations, refined the orders. Because now we had a purpose. We had lit the spark. He fanned the flame.
Reflection. Leadership isn't given, it's earned in the moments no one sees. There are moments in a young man's life when instinct grows louder than fear, when something inside him whispers, "This is your moment." That night in the barracks, when I chose to step forward instead of staying small, my life shifted quietly onto a new road. I didn't become a leader that night. I wasn't ready for that yet. But I learned the first truth of leadership. Leadership begins long before anyone calls you a leader. It begins in private moments, when courage whispers louder than doubt, when instinct pushes past insecurity, when responsibility chooses you before you choose it. Approaching Sergeant de Villiers taught me 3 truths that shaped the rest of my life. 1. A leader reads people before he leads them. Seeing the humanity behind the authority allowed me to approach him with courage instead of fear. 2. Leadership is not about winning, it's about uniting. Teams don't succeed because they are the strongest. They succeed because they believe in something together. 3. Leadership starts with one voice, but lives only when many voices join. One spark, one whisper, one brave question. Years later, when I led teams, businesses, students, even my own life with more intention, I would look back on this night with quiet gratitude. This was the moment the boy stepped out of survivorship and into influence. Not because I had rank, not because I had power, but because I dared to ask, "Sergeant, how do we win?" and dared to carry the weight of the answer.
The Night We Borrowed Trouble. A story about reckless courage, brotherhood, and the dangerous freedom of being young. There are certain weekends in a young man's life that glow brighter than the rest, not because they were wise, not because they were safe, but because something wild inside you needed to breathe. This was one of those weekends. It happened just before the end of our 3-month basic training, at the moment when the fear of instructors had softened just enough for the fire in our chests to return. We had survived the breaking days, the brick drills, the humiliation, the loneliness, and the silent battles in the showers. We were one long weekend away from passing out as real Air Force soldiers. And perhaps that's why we believed we were invincible. We were wrong, of course. But that's the beauty and the danger of being 19, 18, and in my case, 16. The plan that wasn't a plan. It started the way all reckless adventures begin, with a story. One night in the barracks after lights out, I told my roommates about our family farm near Aliwal North in the Eastern Cape. I didn't intend to impress anyone. It was just part of who I was, part of the home I missed. But to them, especially boys who had grown up in cities, the idea of a farm sounded like magic. Frick was the first to react. Frick, the son of a wealthy businessman from Alberton, had the kind of confidence that comes from growing up with everything. His pride and joy were a Nomad Jeep, big, loud, stubborn, and built for adventure. "We must go," he said. "Boet, imagine the stories we'll have when we come back." Justin's eyes were already shining. Ruhi grinned weakly, the way he always did when he wanted to feel part of something bigger than the loneliness he came from. And Dowie, the oldest of us, the steady one, leaned back against his pillow and nodded. "Let's do it." And that was it. 5 young men, 10 hours of road between Pretoria and Aliwal North, and a long weekend that felt like freedom. None of us stopped to ask whether it was wise. Wisdom wasn't something we had yet earned. The road south. Saturday morning before sunrise, we climbed into Frick's Nomad Jeep. The air was cold and crisp, the kind that wakes you up before the day has even begun. We had packed almost nothing. No spare clothes, no proper food, no plan. But we had something more powerful: youth, stubbornness, and a crate of beer. Frick revved the engine like a man announcing his arrival to the entire province. The Jeep growled, spat, and then surged forward. We were on our way. In those days, petrol stations did not operate on weekends. If you didn't plan ahead, you were stuck. But Frick had thought about this, at least partly. His father had helped him fill a few jerry cans before we left Johannesburg. At least, that was the plan. The road stretched endlessly ahead. The Eastern Cape opened around us like a silent cathedral of wind and space. We drove, we sang, we shouted stories over the engine noise. Justin made jokes. Frick swore at the gearbox. Dowie acted as the voice of reason, which none of us listened to. And Ruhi stared out the window, his eyes soft in a way I would only understand years later. Boys who grow up without real homes carry the landscapes of others like borrowed dreams. For a few hours, we forgot the military, forgot the shouting, forgot the discipline, forgot the burden of becoming men. We were just boys on a road adventure. The moment everything went wrong. We reached the outskirts of Reddersburg just after midday. The beer was cold, and the Jeep was humming like a beast finally free of chains. Then Frick slowed down. tapped the fuel gauge, tapped it again. "Mans," he said quietly. "The petrol is done." Justin leaned forward. "Don't joke now, Fricky." "I'm not joking," Frick answered. "We need to fill up from the jerry cans." We pulled into a dusty patch next to a small garage. Frick climbed out, opened the back, and froze. The jerry cans were not there. All of us stared as reality punched us in the teeth at the same time. We had forgotten to load the cans. We had beer, we had youth, we had enthusiasm. But petrol? Not a drop. The garage was closed, the pumps were locked, and weekend petrol didn't exist. 5 boys stood next to a silent Jeep, staring at each other like idiots. The dilemma. We opened more beers. Not to celebrate, to think. Justin scratched his head. Dawi shook his. Ruhe whispered something like a prayer. I stared at the ground, my mind racing. There were only 2 possible sources of petrol in a town like that. The clinic, which had no vehicles, or the police station, which had plenty. And then it came to me. A stupid idea. A crazy idea. An idea born from desperation and youth. But it was the only idea. "Okay, Manna," I finally said. "Don't be scared. I have a plan." They all looked at me the way men look at someone who is about to suggest something wonderfully stupid. I explained it carefully. Dawi and Ruhi would walk into the police station, panicked, and report that they had seen dust and lights in the Veld about 15 kilometers out of town. No details, no accusations, just enough concern to get the police moving. "We're not lying," I told them. "We're reporting what we think we saw." It was thin. Very thin. But thin enough to be legal. While the police went to investigate, Justin and I would borrow petrol from one of the police vehicles. Frick stared at me like I had lost my mind. "Mons, you're crazy. They're not going to fall for that." "They will," I replied, "because we look like soldiers, and soldiers don't lie to the police." He blinked, then grinned. "Okay, let's do it." The plan in motion. We parked the Jeep where it couldn't be seen. Then we approached the station. I studied everything. How many vehicles, how many officers, where they parked, where the exits were. It took half an hour, because this wasn't a prank anymore. This was survival. "Right," I finally said. "Let's go." Dawi and Ruhi walked into the charge office looking shaken and breathless. "We think there was an accident on the gravel road," Dawi said. "Lots of dust, lights moving funny. Couldn't see properly." Perfect. Not too much, not too little. The officers reacted exactly as we hoped. 2 backies roared to life. Within seconds, they were out the gate, heading into the Veld. And just like that, the station was almost empty. Inside, one young constable sat behind the counter, bored, unaware of the trap he was now part of. Justin and I stepped outside, moved quickly, silently. We unscrewed the cap of a police vehicle. Justin held the hose. I sucked until the petrol surged up and filled the pipe. We filled the Jeep first, then a 25-liter water can we had. Our hands reeked of petrol. My heart hammered in my ears. Then Justin tapped my shoulder. The signal. It was time to go. We walked back inside, thanked the young constable for the coffee he had made for Dawi and Ruhi, and left like nothing had happened. The escape. "Go, go, go!" Justin shouted as we climbed into the Jeep. Frick turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared. We shot out of Reddersburg like 5 boys escaping a lion. After 10 kilometers, Frick finally exhaled. Justin laughed. Dawi shook his head in disbelief, and Ruhi sat quietly, a small smile breaking through the fear. But then a darker thought settled into the Jeep. "What if they come back and realize there was no accident?" Justin asked. What if they come looking for us? I swallowed. No one saw us take the petrol, I said. And if they ask questions, we didn't lie. We told them what we thought we saw. It wasn't airtight, but it was enough to calm the nerves. A few minutes later, the Eastern Cape opened ahead of us again. The fear faded, the laughter returned, and adventure wrapped itself around us like a blanket. We were wrong, we were reckless, we were lucky, but we were free.
Reflection. Youth will try anything, but character decides who you become afterwards. Looking back now, I can smile at the madness of that day, but beneath the humor lies something deeper, a lesson carved softly, quietly, almost invisibly into my soul. That day taught me that 1. Brotherhood is built in the moments you face the impossible together. We weren't just 5 boys stealing petrol. We were 5 young men learning to trust each other's courage, instincts, and stupidity all at once. 2. Fear sharpens instinct. While everyone else panicked, something in me switched on, a calmness, a clarity, a willingness to step into leadership even when the idea was outrageous. 3. Right and wrong are not always simple at 16. We didn't choose the moral path, but the intention behind it wasn't evil. It was survival, adventure, belonging. 4. Reckless choices shape mature wisdom later. I didn't walk away proud. I walked away older, more aware, more responsible, and that may be the greatest truth. Youth gives you the fire, but character teaches you where to aim it. That night, as the Jeep sped through the Eastern Cape and the last light faded behind the hills, I realized something about myself, something I would only understand fully many years later. I wasn't just becoming a soldier. I was becoming a man who could think under pressure, lead when needed, and carry the weight of consequences. The adventure was reckless, the method was wrong, but the lesson stayed with me for life.
The day the squadron stood as one. A story about unity, purpose, and learning that winning is never just about you. The end of basic training crept up on us in a strange way. On one hand, it felt like we had been at the Air Force Base forever, living inside a world of shouting dust, sweat, and constant demands. On the other hand, it felt like the first day on the parade ground had only just happened. But the calendar didn't lie. 2 weeks left. The conversation started shifting from survival to future. Where do you want to go? One evening, in that brief, fragile quiet after lights out, guys in the barracks began talking about postings. We had received a list of possible bases: Hogesprut, Oosterplaat, Swartkop, Valhalla, Bloemfontein, Langebaan. Names that sounded like different lives. Some wanted to stay in Pretoria, close to city life, girlfriends, familiar streets. Others dreamed of the bush, airplanes, or coastal air. For the first time since arriving, we were being asked what we wanted. Not ordered, not told, asked. It felt strange, almost wrong. I remember thinking, you mean my voice matters? I can request something? Negotiate? It was the first small hint that we were no longer just boys being shouted at. We were becoming soldiers whose preferences at least counted enough to be written on a form. But before any of that became real, there was one more mountain to climb. The trophy. Under the eucalyptus trees. One evening, Sergeant de Villiers called our squadron together. We gathered under a stand of eucalyptus trees, the air thick with that sharp, oily smell and the faint dust of the parade ground. He didn't shout. His voice, when it came, was soft, but carried purpose. "Men," he said, "the time has come." We fell quiet. "You may not realize it now," he continued, "but I have been preparing you for the last 2 weeks for one thing: the squadron trophy." He explained the competition. There were 5 areas: physical fitness tests, a quarter-mile run with full kit, parade drill, shooting range, and a bonus surprise event. It's not about individual stars, he reminded us. Every man's score counts. The result is the average. You don't win this alone. You win it as a squadron or not at all. We had started basic with more men. Through injury, failure, and withdrawals, 6 had fallen away. 24 of us remained, almost soldiers now, shaped by months of shouting and shared suffering. Then Sergeant de Villiers mentioned the part that unsettled all of us. The bonus event, he said. Only Sergeant Major Slang knows what it will be. A murmur went through the group. We all knew Slang Van Zyl, short, stocky, red mustache that seemed to move before he did. Silent, but dangerous Gastauffel Poe. The kind of man whose presence made your stomach clench even before he opened his mouth. We joked in the barracks that surely no one could love him, not even his wife. Looking back, it was our way of diffusing fear with humor. We couldn't control him, but we could laugh at the edges of his shadow. But we also knew one thing for certain. If he designed the surprise event, it was not going to be soft. A circle, a prayer, and a blanket. The night before the evaluation, the atmosphere in the barracks changed. No joking, no loud laughter, just quiet men, each in his own thoughts. We had done all we could. Training was over. Fitness was what it was. Skill levels weren't going to change in 12 hours. All that remained was mindset. Dawi, the oldest and most grounded of us, called us together. "Come, men," he said. "Let's talk." We formed a circle between the beds. 24 tired bodies, 24 hearts that had been pushed to their limits. Dawi's voice was calm, with that quiet authority that makes you lean in. "Listen," he said. "The only way we win this is if we stand so close together that you could cover all of us with one blanket." He let the words sink in. "Watch your brothers," he continued. "If you see someone struggle, help him. If someone falls, pick him up. If you see someone cry, wipe his tears. This is not about one strong man. This is about all our strengths poured into one shared effort." We stood there, silent. Then Dawi said, "Let's pray." We bowed our heads. He didn't pray to win. He prayed for protection, for strength, for safety. He asked that God would be with every man, in our squadron and beyond. It was not a performance. It was a conversation with someone he trusted. When he finished, there were no speeches, just a quiet sense of togetherness. Then, almost naturally, the dog tags started again. Tap, tap, tap. That same old rhythm we had used on hard nights, now not as defiance, but as preparation. Our way of saying to each other, we are in this together. We breathe together. We move together. Tomorrow, we stand as one. The competition begins. Before dawn, the parade ground was already alive. The air was cold enough to bite. Breath steamed out in little clouds as we formed up, each squadron in its place. The competition began with the physical exercises. Push-ups, sit-ups, burpees, sprints. The kind of things we had done 1,000 times, but now every repetition carried extra weight. Every man's performance pulled the average up or down. We shouted encouragement to each other under our breath. No one was allowed to collapse into self-pity. If one man hesitated, another growled, "Come on, you've got this," through clenched teeth. Then came the quarter mile with full kit, webbing biting into shoulders, boots slamming into the ground, lungs heaving. Around the track we went, each of us fighting the voice that said, "Just slow down. No one will notice." They did notice. We noticed. We were running for each other. When it was over, we didn't celebrate. We just climbed into the Bedfords for the next phase, the shooting range. An unexpected kindness. When we arrived at the range, we saw something that made us all pause. There, under a canopy, stood a line of tables covered with cold drinks and finger snacks. We stared. This was not normal. Kindness was not a word often associated with basic training. One of the instructors grinned. "Come, man," he said. "Eat, drink. This is punishment for the kitchen staff. They've been getting soft. Let's not let the food go to waste." We were suspicious at first. You learn quickly during training that anything that looks too friendly usually comes with a hidden sting. But slowly, cautiously, we moved forward. Bottles were opened, snacks were eaten. For a few minutes, we tasted something we hadn't expected that day. Relief. Then it was back to business. We moved to the range, shots fired, targets dropped or stayed standing. Scores were written down. All the while, that invisible calculator was running in the background. Every hit counts, every miss counts, every man matters. Waiting under the trees. After the shooting, we returned to the parade ground for the drill section. By then, our bodies were tired, but our movements were sharp. Weeks of practice came together in precise turns, well-timed halts, and boots hitting the ground like a single foot. When the drill was done, we were dismissed to wait under the trees while the scores were tallied. That waiting felt longer than any run. We sat in small groups, dirty and exhausted, replaying moments in our minds. Did I run fast enough? Did I miss that one target? Did I mess up a turn? Time stretched, and then he appeared. Sergeant Major Slang, walking onto the parade ground with his usual tight jaw and unreadable face. The call came. "Fall in!" We snapped into formation almost automatically. He opened a file, glanced at the pages, and began. "Squadron 1, he said. "No events 1. A murmur. "Squadron 2, 3 events 1. A surge of electricity shot through us. "Squadron 3, 2 events 1. We exploded. Discipline crumbled for a moment as cheers broke out, arms went up, men stepped out of line without waiting for any command. For the first time, our reactions were not controlled by fear, but by joy. Of course, it wasn't allowed. But in that moment, no one cared. We had done it. Almost. The surprise event, Sergeant Major Slang raised his hand for silence. His voice stayed firm. "If Squadron 3 wins the final event," he said, "the trophy is shared. If Squadron 1 wins, Squadron 2 wins the overall competition." The final event. The unknown. He explained the rules. All squadrons will line up on this side of the parade ground. On the whistle, you pick up a buddy and carry him to the other side. Then you swap. The one who carried will be carried back. The first squadron with all men back across the line wins. We went quiet. This wasn't new to us. Sergeant de Villiers had drilled us on this exercise over and over. We knew exactly who would carry whom. We understood weights, strengths, and pairings. There would be no confusion. For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of real confidence. We were ready. The whistle blew. Bodies went up onto shoulders. Feet pounded the ground. Shouts of encouragement filled the air. We moved like a machine. Planned, practiced, precise. When it was over, lungs burning, sweat stinging our eyes, Sergeant Major Slang announced the result. Squadron 1 wins. We had come second, winning by not winning. A wave of disappointment washed over me. We had been so close. We had prepared so well. We had wanted that final victory. But as I watched Squadron 1 cheering, their faces finally glowing with the joy of winning something, another feeling slowly rose to the surface. I was glad for them. Truly. We had won the overall trophy. They had won the final event. No one walked away empty-handed. In a strange way, it felt right. For me, it stopped being about beating anyone. It became about something else. We had stood together. We had given everything. We had become more than a collection of scared boys in boots. The next day would be the pass-out parade, polished boots, pressed uniforms, speeches, the presence of women soldiers on the field, proud parents in the distance, and the quiet knowledge that basic training was behind us. But for me, the real passing out happened under those eucalyptus trees the night before, and on that parade ground the day of the competition. That's where we moved from me to us.
Reflection. Real victory is measured in we, not me. When I look back on that final competition, the trophies and scores are not what stand out. What I remember is my Dawi praying under the trees, the way we watched each other during the run, how a strong guy would slow down just enough so a weaker one didn't fall behind. The shared silence as we waited for the results. Basic training had taught us discipline, obedience, and physical toughness, but that day taught us something deeper. 1. True strength is shared. One strong man can win a race, but it takes a united team to win a trophy that depends on everyone's score. 2. Leadership is collective. Sergeant de Villiers shaped us. Dawi anchored us. Each man who whispered, "Keep going," stepped into leadership, even for a moment. Leadership wasn't a rank. It was a responsibility we passed between us like a torch. 3. Winning at someone else's expense is not real winning. There was something profoundly right about Squadron 1 winning that last event. They needed that victory. We needed the lesson. Sometimes the most satisfying outcome is when everyone walks away with something, dignity, pride, or proof that their effort mattered. 4. Unity is a choice, not a feeling. We didn't always like each other. We didn't always agree. We were tired, sore, and often irritated. But when it mattered, we chose to stand as one. That choice stayed with me. Later in life, in business and community work, in my own family, I would see the same pattern. You can chase success alone and feel strangely empty at the top, or you can build something with others, something where everyone's contribution matters, and discover that the real trophy isn't a piece of metal at all. It's the knowledge that you stood together, under pressure, under scrutiny, under the weight of expectation, and you did not fall apart. That day on the parade ground, we didn't just win a competition. We learned how to be a squadron. And for the boy who had once stood at the gate of the base, wondering if he could handle what lay ahead, that lesson would become one of the most valuable footprints in the journey of his soul.
The Day I Chose My Future. A story about claiming your own path, stepping beyond the shadows of your past, and realizing that manhood is built on choices, not chances. The week after pass out was one of the strangest weeks of my young life. For almost 3 months, everything in our world had been sharp edges, loud commands, and the unrelenting rhythm of discipline. A life built from orders, a clock built from other men's decisions, a body shaped by exhaustion and adrenaline. And then suddenly it stopped. No more shouting across the parade ground. No more boots hitting the floor at 4:30. No more instructors bursting through the barracks door with chaos in their voices. Instead, a stillness settled over us. A strange, uneasy quiet. You would think we would welcome it. You would think we would relax. Instead, that silence made us restless. We had been rebuilt into men who needed purpose, momentum, direction. Standing still felt wrong, as if someone had paused life without warning. For the first time since arriving at the Air Force Base, we realized how much we wanted to know what came next, where we would be sent, who we would become, what future waited on the other side of this hard, new identity. 3 days passed like that. Boys pretending to be men, men pretending not to worry, all of us walking in circles around the parade ground, waiting for clarity to arrive. It finally came on Wednesday. A corporal walked toward us with a clipboard tucked under his arm. The same corporal who had marched us, shouted at us, and tested us until our legs shook. But this time, he spoke like a messenger. not an executioner. "Interviews start tomorrow," he said. "There is a list on the notice board. Check your time. Don't miss it." Interviews, a panel, a choice. Or so we hoped. You learn quickly in the military. A choice sometimes means the privilege of asking for something you may never get. Still, it was the first time anyone had spoken about our futures as if they belonged to us too. And that thought settled in my chest like a spark waiting for oxygen. My interview was scheduled for Friday morning. For 2 days, I tried not to think about it. But every night when the barracks quieted down and the dog tags stopped clinking and the day's noise faded, my mind wandered to one memory. My father sending me to a school I never chose. A decision that almost broke my spirit. A choice made for me, without me. And now here I was, now 17, standing on the edge of another decision that could shape the rest of my life. I told myself, almost like a prayer, no one decides this for me. Not this time. The panel Friday came. I stood outside the interview room with my heart beating the same way it had on the day I arrived. Fast, tight, too loud. Not fear this time. Something deeper. A hunger to claim what life had denied me before. A plaque on the door read, "Selection Panel, Air Force Personnel." Inside, I knew, were men whose signatures held more power over my future than anything I had yet experienced. But the difference was clear. I would walk in there with a voice. I would walk in there knowing who I had become. When my name, well, my new name was called, I stepped inside. 3 officers sat behind a long wooden table, a major in the middle, 2 lieutenants on either side. Their uniforms were perfect, their faces unreadable. Their authority filled the room like smoke. I snapped to attention, made eye contact with the major, and saluted. "At ease," he said, his voice steady and unexpectedly warm. "Sit, troop." I sat, back straight, hands on my knees. He looked at the file in front of him. Then he said, the one thing I didn't expect. "Chris, or should I call you Mons?" I felt a strange mixture of discomfort and pride. "Mons is fine, Major," I replied. "It's the name everyone knows me by now." He nodded, almost approvingly. Then he began reading my report, my entire journey captured on paper in a level of detail that startled me. He knew everything. My strengths, my mistakes. The day I hid in a locker. The day I nearly broke. The week I stood up. The moment I showed leadership. When he finished, he leaned back slightly, studying me. "Mons," he said, "you have endurance. You think strategically. You have leadership qualities. But academically, you threw your future away." His honesty landed like a punch. But then he added, "That's not the end of the world, troop. Here, you can complete your matric through the military college. And from there, you can study further if you choose. Study. Books, desks, classrooms." I almost smiled. I had just survived 3 months of hell. The thought of sitting at a desk felt like another world entirely. Then he leaned forward. "Mans, I want to offer you something. Something different." I held my breath. "You have the makings of a physical training instructor. With your fitness, your resilience, your instinct, you could be trained to lead others, to shape recruits, to become the standard they must meet. A PTI, an instructor, a leader. At 17. For a moment, I felt the room tilt. Me? Training men older than me? Becoming one of the elite instructors that every recruit feared? The major saw the uncertainty in my eyes. "You don't need to be afraid," he said gently. "We will train you. You can do this." I asked for a moment to think. He gave me 5 minutes. I closed my eyes. I thought of my father telling me I'd make a good tradesman. I thought of the men I admired in these past months. I thought of engines and tools and the comfort of working with my hands. I thought of the pride in maintaining aircraft, real machines with real power. And then I knew. "Major," I said, opening my eyes, "I want to become an aircraft technician, and I would like to be posted to Bloomsprout in the Free State." He stared at me for a moment. Then he smiled. A real smile this time. "I tried," he said, "but you have chosen your path. And that is what matters. If you ever change your mind, come find me." I saluted again. But this time, something inside me saluted too. Not the military, not the officers, but the boy I had been, and the young man I had become. I had chosen my future. For the first time in my life, the decision belonged to me. They handed me my posting instructions. 2 weeks from now, I would report to Bloomsprout Air Force Base, 8th Squadron, the Impalas. My chest swelled with something too big for words. Joy, pride, hope, possibility. A future I had shaped with my own hands. And for a long moment, standing outside that interview room, I let myself breathe the truth slowly. I am stepping into a life I chose. And nothing, not fear, not my past, not anyone else, could take that away from me.
Reflection. Your future begins the day you decide it belongs to you. There are moments in life that divide us into before and after. This was one of mine. Not the day I survived the pole drills, not the day they tried to break us in the pool, not the day my name was taken. It was the day I claimed my future. For the first time, I walked into a room where others held the power, but I did not walk in powerless. I walked in knowing something the boy in Chapter 1 never knew. Your life becomes your own the day you step forward and choose it. The Major offered me a path of leadership. He saw strength in me I did not yet fully understand. But the deeper truth was this: leadership doesn't begin with leading others. It begins with leading yourself. And that day, I led myself. I chose my path. I chose my future. I chose the version of myself I wanted to grow into. This moment taught me 3 principles that would anchor my life for decades to come. 1. Guidance can shape you, but choices define you. Many people, from parents to schools to officers, try to shape our lives, some with love, some with authority, some with good intentions, some blindly. But the day you say, "This is my decision," is the day you step into adulthood. 2. A name can be given to you, but your destiny cannot. The military gave me a new name. The system gave me rules. Life gave me hardship. But destiny remains personal, always chosen. 3. Manhood is not measured by age. It is measured by ownership. When you take ownership of your direction, your growth, your purpose, your path, you stop being a passenger in your own story. You become the author. That day, leaving the interview room, I didn't feel older. I felt responsible, grounded, clear. I had stepped out of the boy's shadow and into the young man's future, and the truth that settled in me that day would stay with me for life. You can't control how your story starts, but you have every right to decide where it goes. Epilogue. Chapter 3. Footprints in the Sand. How the military shaped my mindset, my soul, and the formation of thought and feeling. Looking back on those months now, I realized that basic training was never simply about discipline or service. It was a turning point in the development of my mindset, a reshaping of my soul, and the beginning of understanding how my thoughts and feelings were formed. 1. The mindset that was carved, not taught. Before the Air Force, mindset was something I carried unconsciously, shaped by childhood, family, school, and instinct. But the military stripped away the parts of me that were soft, reactive, or uncertain, and pressed me into a mold I did not yet recognize. I learned that mindset forms under pressure, not comfort. Discipline is not shouted into you. It rises inside you when you refuse to stay down. Resilience is not inherited. It is discovered the moment you break and rise again. Hiding in a locker with tears running down my face didn't show weakness. It showed the doorway through which strength would later enter. Being pinned under a boot wasn't humiliation. It was the moment the boy inside me surrendered so the young man could stand up. By the end of basic training, my mindset had shifted from survival to responsibility, from fear to awareness, from reacting to responding. I understood for the first time that manhood is not a rite of age. It is a decision made daily. 2. The soul that expanded through hardship. Your soul is not your mind. It is not your experiences. It is not even your emotions. Your soul is the quiet inner compass, the place where meaning is born. During basic training, my soul stretched in ways it never had before. Through brotherhood, where boys from different worlds became a single heartbeat. Through service, learning that your strength means nothing if it doesn't protect someone else. Through identity, discovering that even when your name is taken, the essence of who you are cannot be. Through humility, realizing that winning is never about one man, but about all men moving together. The soul evolves when life forces you to confront yourself, stripped, tired, afraid, and invites you to choose who you want to be next. 3. The formation of thoughts and feelings under fire. We are not born with fully formed thoughts and feelings. They grow from exposure, repetition, and meaning. In the military, my thoughts were shaped by rhythms, the cadence of boots, breath, orders, unity, consequences, learning quickly that every action creates either pain or progress, observation, watching leaders, weaknesses, strengths, patterns in people, instinct, the quiet voice that told me when to step forward, when to stay silent, when to lead. My feelings were shaped by fear, not the kind that paralyzes, but the kind that sharpens awareness. Belonging, realizing that none of us survived alone. Pride, the quiet kind, born from endurance rather than achievement. Responsibility, understanding that leadership begins long before rank. The military did not create my thoughts and feelings, it refined them. It removed what was unnecessary and intensified what would serve me later in life. 4. The man who walked out through the gate. When basic training ended, something profound happened. The world did not celebrate us. There were no medals for surviving the breaking, but inside me, something had changed permanently. I walked in as a boy trying to hide his fear, a son still shaped by home, a body that could run but not yet endure. I walked out as a young man who understood responsibility, a soldier who carried unity, not ego, a soul stretched by hardship, a mindset sharpened by pressure, a thinker shaped by experience, a feeler shaped by resilience. This chapter, these months, left a footprint on my soul and my soul, a footprint made of dust, sweat, fear, unity, mistakes, laughter, rhythm, and choice. It is the footprint of becoming. The boy who arrived at the Air Force Base could never have written this, but the man who walked out could never forget it.